for an engineering org, like what are the causes, what are the conditions, and what are the early signs that indicate your team or your engineering organization are predisposed or at risk of burnout? And so I was hoping we could talk a little bit about some of those. And so Sabry, Erica, Lori, would love to hear your thoughts there.
Sure, I'll start. I think there are a few things. One is like, because we're at home and because we're not around our colleagues on a regular basis, it's very easy to feel a disconnection from the work. And so when you feel disconnected from the work, what happens is you tend to stay in your own head. And the longer you stay in your own head, sometimes you get into a very negative cycle, a very cynical cycle. And these conditions, if a leader is not aware of that happening, and you think about the deadlines we have, and you think about in general how engineering teams work, it starts to become this pretty poor cycle for people to be in. Like they're in their own heads, they don't feel connection to the work, their heads down. There's not a good delineation between home and work. I mean, this is something I experienced myself, that it's really hard to manage. And oftentimes you're not aware of it. So if teams are not really focused on that personal factor and focused on the actual wellness of their teams, but tend to only look at productivity and how much output the team is putting, then it can be a very dangerous thing. And I'm incidentally, I'm deliberately using that word. So what we believe is that you have to start with awareness, making people aware of burnout, making people aware of the things that they're experiencing, but also giving them an avenue to be able to talk about it, to not just make those gatherings be about the actual work itself and, planning and when's the next sprint and so on and so forth, but to actually start with a very basic question of like, how are you doing? And I think it can be forgotten sometimes. And it's certainly something that we saw. And when we went into the world of remote, it was a lot harder to do. So that's just one quick thing I can think of.
Yeah, it's interesting to reflect, especially during the peak of COVID when everything was happening. One of the first things that we started doing, and we're still doing today, is we started a Women in Tech listening session for some of the challenges that people were facing. They just needed a forum to talk about the challenges. And there's no doubt that the pandemic has been especially hard on women. A lot of the childcare and caring in general in the family has been negatively impacting women. And we needed to create that forum. And it was interesting to just listen to some of the challenges that they were all going through. And listening is one of the most important things because it creates empathy and knowing that you're not alone. And just having that validation feels really, really good. But that's only one step of it, because then there's also action. You want people to feel comfortable to say how they feel, but that is not always the case. And I remember several times, even today, I mean, you have some countries that are shut down where you can't even travel and they can't even see their loved ones, even in the current state. And when you see a rock star engineer where they were just doing phenomenal, and then all of a sudden something seems off, guess what? The odds are something is off, and they maybe didn't feel comfortable to talk to anyone about it. They might be all in their head, like Sabry described, and they're struggling. And so it's our job as peers, as leaders, to go and lean in and see if they need some help. So I think there's many different tools that we all need to be practicing when we feel that things are just not right. And that is a new journey that we're on now, and we got to continue forward. And I see it happening quite a bit. So the more that we can lean on each other and also just share our own struggles, I think we'll all be better for it.
I think the piece I'd add there, Patrick, too, we often refer to a term when we think about diversity inclusion as the term of an iceberg, and how leaders and employees even, we all presented what we call what was above the water. So the part of the iceberg you could see is what we knew about our teams and what we shared about ourselves even. But the more we went into the pandemic, the more we saw, what was really below the surface. People were having to juggle a million different things. And what it really brought up for me personally and for some of the leaders that I coach is you now have way more information than you had before. But what are you going to do with it? Are you going to pretend like you don't know? Are you going to pretend like you don't see that people are being asked to carry a lot of stuff. People are doing homeschool right now. They're teaching their kids. There's no daycare. They're doing their job. They're stopping to be the chief cook and bottle washer. You got to do the laundry. You got to do all these things because life is really happening, but we can't pretend like we don't see it. If you pretend like you don't see it, you're missing all the opportunities to lean in and provide support. So creating that dialogue and being transparent, one of the things that I think the three of us were able to do in some of the meetings that we were in with what we call our first team, we're there for each other first too, is just be honest. Today was like this. I have this happening. I got school. I got to figure out how to get the video set up for my kid over here. I have these deadlines, and really talking about it so that it's actually okay for others to say, hey, me too, this is what my day looks like, so that we can figure out how do we balance that and create the space for people to have what they need in order to continue to do great work.